we want you to be comfortable with your logbook. If you do it correctly, that should be 2 minutes out of your entire interview.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot, what's up? It's Nick Fialka. You found another interview episode of Ready for Pushback. It's Monday, so you know it's time to interview. And today we are talking about logbooks, how to organize your logbooks. If you are a person that has been in the military, this is probably pretty interesting to you. If you are a person who had difficulty managing their logbooks and keeping them in order and looking nice and focused and just perfect, this is a great episode for you because I talked to Kim and Chris from MilKEEP, and what they do is they help convert military logbooks into something logical that speaks FAA instead of speaking military. The way each branch of the military captures their flight time, believe it or not, is different in each branch, and it's different than a civilian would capture their time. And it can get very confusing, get very into the weeds. And so I thought I would bring Kim and Chris here to have the conversation because the unknowns, you just either have to be really good at it, like really focused and a professional at it like they are, or you need to give it to them so that they can do it. You know, I hear it all the time. I actually just got this call yesterday asking about how to convert trainer time into PIC or SIC, pilot in command or second in command. And if you were a flight student, could you log any of that student time as PIC? And really, the only thing you can log as PIC, from what I understand, is your solo time. Anything other than that, you're under instruction, so you are not the pilot in command, even though you may be the sole operator of the controls. It's this weird gray area, and that's where you would go to Kim and Chris and ask them about that and try to sort that out. So this is a great conversation. Even if you're not military, stick around because I think that they had a lot to say. It will give you some really good insights, and it's always great to know what everybody else is doing. So sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with Kim and Chris over at MilKEEP, MilKEEP. I'll put all the information in the show notes. You can have all of that. One of my favorite conversations. So sit back and relax. I'm happy you're here. So let's get to it.
And last but not least, let's have a quick word from our sponsors because without them, we wouldn't have this awesome podcast. Hey, pilot, it's Nick. I want to tell you about a great friend of the show, Timothy P. Pope. He's a financial planner, and he's completely focused on the professional pilot. He's the kind of guy you want to go to for real talk to help you figure out your financial future. With so many upgrades and so many transitions and so many things going on, you owe it to yourself to give him a call. He'll help you design and execute really smart financial planning strategies, whether it's retirement planning, investment management, military transition, tax planning. He's a great financial planning partner. Timothy P. Pope, CFP, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. Give him a shout. All the information's in the show notes. You should definitely tell him I told you to call. All right, here we are with another really cool guest, or should I say guests. I have Kim and Chris Uhland from MilKEEP. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey.
Doing great. How are you?
How are you?
I am awesome. I really, really appreciate you guys coming on. We have been playing phone tag now for a couple days, and it is nice to sit down and see you guys again. We met way back when at the RTAG convention, and I was so interested in MilKEEP, this computer program. First off, anybody that comes up with a computer program, like that blows my mind because my brain is too small to comprehend it. But what you guys do is so interesting. Will you kind of walk me through, if I've never heard of MilKEEP, right? Can you walk me through what your company is?
Sure.
Yeah, I would say we started as a digital conversion and time conversion service for military pilots. So we will take your military flight records and convert them to civilian speak, if you will, civilian equivalent hours, because in the military do not classify their time in the same way. So you kind of have, once you use our service, or if you use our service, you have then an apples to apples comparison when you're going to say, hey, I have this whole military career, and here's what it means in the civilian world when I'm going to apply to airlines.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So can you give me an example of one of the things that is like super confusing for a person coming out of the military?
Yeah, I can give a great. So I'm an Air Force pilot by trade, but so the Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, none of them log their time the same way, and none of them are the civilian equivalent that the airlines talk about. When the airlines talk, they say pilot in command or PIC time, second in command, SIC time. And a really good example, we actually wrote an entire article on this. The Air Force has a type of time called secondary time, but it is not the same as second in command time, not even close. And so that's the name of the article is SEC versus SIC, what a difference a letter makes. And it basically talks about when you can apply or when you're supposed to be logging secondary time in the Air Force versus when you're supposed to be logging second in command time in the airlines or in the GA civilian flying world. That's a really good example. They sound almost identical, and people still write in all the time. They're like, hey, this was secondary time. It should be in the SIC column. And we have to coach them through it and say, hey, this is not what this means. Here, read this article. Here are all the definitions from the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. Here are the definitions from the Air Force regulation and how they're different.
Do you just have an auto reply on your email that just like sends out that link?
That one is an FAQ, and it was such a popular FAQ that, we wrote the article. So, and that's on our resources page. So we have a bunch of things like that.
Yeah. So I'm a military guy. I'm a Navy guy. And as I transitioned over into this world, it was like, 6 years ago into the airline world. And I remember it took me about 2.5 weeks of just straight, like 3 or 4 hours a day, sitting down with a pencil and a paper and writing everything. I converted my stuff to Excel, which was a huge train wreck. And then it was just like groupthink of like me reaching out to my bros and sis's like, yo, what about this kind of time? How do I log that kind of time? Do I have enough? Like that can get super confusing. So how did you kind of drill that down? Do you have an idea? I don't know, when somebody's picking up the phone and calling you and reaching out or sending the email, like with so many different variables, like how do you break it all down?
Yes, that's a great question. That's actually exactly how we got started. When I was going for my ATP and I had my check ride the next day, the instructor said, when you meet the examiner, you're going to have this logbook and you're going to show him all your time. And I said, oh, great. I've got my military flight records, so that's good. And he said, no, that's not how this works. Well, okay, what do I need to do? And Kim and I did the same thing. We sat down. Thank God Kim helped me, but it took us, 20 or more hours.
Weekend.
Everything into Excel.
He had me chained to the radiator, Nick.
And then,
oh my gosh, my wife does the same thing. But
no, I'm kidding. Yeah. It was a process.
It was brutal. And then the same thing. I said, well, obviously the FAA would at least tell us how we convert our time, and I did the research there.
Right.
Not even close, right? There's nothing that talks about how to convert it. So it was all from people posting, well, this is what I did. This is how we should do things. And after that, I wanted to just pay somebody to do it. I say, you know what? I had other things I got to worry about right now. I've got a family.
I just gotten home from a deployment.
I just got back from a deployment and I was working in the Pentagon. It was awful.
It's always awful. 8 years in the Pentagon, it was awful every single second.
So I just wanted to pay somebody. And when I was searching for it, all I got was post after post of, why doesn't this exist? This is the worst part about applying to the airlines. I would pay so much money if I didn't have to do this. And we said, there are people that need help. And so why not try to share the knowledge that we learned along the journey while I was trying to get my ATP?
Has there been any more like concrete verbiage from the FAA about like do this with that?
Nope. No, there hasn't. We were at another convention. This was more of an Air Force specific one, Airlift Tanker Association. I ran into one of the FAA administrators that Pete Buttigieg sent there specifically to talk about stuff like this. And hopefully he'll reach out and we'll talk to him a little bit more about it. But there is nothing in the CFR that governs how to translate any type of military time from any service to the other. So luckily, being in the Air Force for 15 years, I had some background knowledge that we could create the initial system for Air Force pilots. And then after we launched, shortly thereafter, we got inundated with requests from the Navy and the Army and the Marines saying, why don't you do this for our service? And so we initially reached out through our Facebook page saying, hey, if anyone in the Army is interested in a beta test, send us your stuff just so we can take a look. And then so we had to get into Army regulations and figure out how they do everything based off of a duty symbol. And then we had a small group test. We said, hey, we need rotary wing guys, we need fixed wing guys. So we tried to get a big swath of all the different types of airframes that the Army had, built that system out. We finally got it to work because their system is a little bit different in the sense that every single time you log a different flight condition, right, whether it's instrument time or night time, it looks like a different line entry. So if you're not looking at it properly on the spreadsheet, what could be like a 2-hour sortie is listed on 4 lines and it looks like it's 8 hours, right? So if you're not at it correctly, you could get in a lot of trouble by overstating your hours. So I think Army was the second we launched, and then obviously Navy and Marines grew out differently.
After.
So my mind immediately goes to V-22, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because it's called what? Powered lift? Is that right?
Yeah, and that's one of the engine categories that we have inside of MilKEEP that you classify something as.
Do airlines look at that differently? They probably don't these days. They're probably like, hey, anybody with a pulse, come on, let's go.
It's gotten a lot better. It used to be when we started, I think like 6 years ago, it was, this is a rotary wing, and that's all we're counting it as. And then they started to allow some of it to count towards an ATP. And then now the airlines, basically, I think you obviously will designate if something is a rotary wing or powered lift or fixed wing. And some of the airlines have like a minimum fixed wing requirement. But that's the other interesting thing about this world is that every airline wants something different, even though at the end of the day, you'll have PIC time and SIC time. They all want it displayed in a different manner. Some want your instructor time to be included in your PIC. Some want it completely separated out. So building the different summary pages as all the airlines grow and evolve their application sites, it's tough to keep up with all the different changes that they make. Southwest is notorious for it. They change every other month or something like that. It seems like they're asking for a new type of time during their interview. And luckily, we've got a good user base now. They come back and they give us feedback and they say, hey, this got changed. And so we push the update to the site for everybody. And so it's great that everybody wants to help the community after they come back from an interview and learn stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that is the best part of this industry is that the people in your circle, the pilots that interact with you, they're the most giving, generous people. They want you to succeed, not just have a great business, but also like just succeed in life and everything around it. And man, every time, everywhere I go, every pilot's looking to help out, go to every convention, and every person is like, hey, this is what this airline just talked to me about. I wasn't thinking about this. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah.
And like, oh, this was different. I've read 50 trip reports about everything, and now this is totally different. I was not expecting that. And you make the modification, you pivot, and you grow together. I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like we wouldn't be nearly where we are without the support. Everyone's been so supportive, just giving us suggestions. Hey guys, maybe you should offer this feature, or hey guys, I just went to a new interview and they asked me this question, or everybody's been really, really supportive. Honestly, wouldn't be where we are without it.
Yeah.
We're grateful for that all the time.
We've gotten people coming back saying, here's the exact summary page format that they want, but it's not something that's publicly available, right? And given to people who arrive at the interview. So now we can share things and give people a little bit more of a heads up, a little more confidence as they're going into an interview because they've seen the summary template before that they're required to fill out.
Right.
Yeah. And that, like any variable in an interview, any variable is enough to crush. And so it can just totally throw you off your game. So the more you're prepped and the more you're ready, the better you're going to do on it. Like probably the most stressful day of your life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when it comes to public math, right? Trying to pivot when you're telling a story or try to say, oh, well, this also relates to customer service because X, Y, and Z. Nobody likes public math.
Yeah.
Getting into decimals.
I carry an E6B with me in my wallet just to have it. That's an Air Force joke. So, okay, what if I'm not in the military? All right, let's talk about the civilian side of the house, because I think that's important to know that this is not just for the military folks. Can you lay out how the civilian world rolls into this as well?
Yeah. The way that we started with that was we had enough users who were either reserves or guard, and they were also flying on the civilian side. And they started coming up to us saying, hey, I want somewhere where I can keep both of my lives in one spot. I want to keep my military hours here and I want to keep my civilian hours here. How do I log my civilian time? And we started looking into, hey, maybe we should build this out so that people can keep both in one spot. So we do get people who are strictly civilian users, and they send us their records. We have, there's a template that they fill out, and we upload it to their profile for them. And then they have their logbook there. And then they have all the summary pages and all the bells and whistles that we offer available to them as well.
Okay. I love that. And I think that what it does is kind of like the easy button, so you can pivot back and forth and be able to have confidence to know that like it's a one-stop shop. You get here, you do this, and you're done. And you just like update it as you need to.
Exactly.
Will you walk me through the process? I'm the new guy, Nick. I'm a new customer. Nice to meet you. Thank you. I want to get my job at my dream airline, but I've been flying for 27 years and I got 4,000 hours of time in these 5 logbooks. What do I do?
Sure. So for the military users, what we have a document prep page for every single service, because every service names their files differently. But we have instructional videos and step-by-step instructions. Hey, this is the file that you need. Air Force users, some of the older ones they only have paper records. So you have to scan them and upload a PDF or an Excel file. And then we take care of the rest from there. And then if you want to upload your civilian stuff, similar to any of the other civilian logbooks, they basically have a template and say, fill in the template like this and upload it. And then the system converts everything for you.
And then once you're converted, you want to hit the settings page and start tinkering around with your settings.
Yeah, that's the other unique thing about MilKEEP is when you go, like you said, there's no hard and fast way that you specifically have to convert your time, right? It would be nice, especially military people are saying, hey, I'm used to regulations. You're telling me exactly how to do something and there's nothing written down. So on your settings page, there are different preferences for how you want your time converted, what percentages you would like to allocate towards PIC for certain aircraft or for certain duty positions. So it's really a tailorable thing. And then when you go into your settings page and you decide, I want to add taxi time as a military conversion factor, or I want to not include other time, every time you hit update, it dynamically recalculates your entire logbook for you.
Or PIC time.
Or anything, right? So it's a living, dynamic logbook that you can have. You can make changes to your preferences. If one airline wants it one way, you can set up your preferences, hit print on the logbook, and then go back into your settings page and change everything back for the next airline. It's all whatever you want, which is really nice.
And at the end of the day, my experience with my interview at my major airline, they wanted you to bring logbooks, but they also wanted you to have a summary page as well. That kind of was your one-stop shop. Can all that stuff be gonculated and created from MilKEEP?
Absolutely. When we first started, the only summary pages we had were an IACRA page for your ATP application, right? Airlineapps.com and pilotcredentials.com, because those are the two major sites that all the airlines go to. Now we have Airline Apps, Pilot Credentials, UPS, FedEx. Southwest has a specific interview page. So we have the Southwest page, which kind of is similar to Pilot Credentials, how they do the application. But then when you get the interview, they say, oh, by the way, during the interview, we're going to ask these specific logbook questions. And so that was something that was given back to us from the members saying, here's what I had to do, here's the email. And, we were able to build an interview specific page for people that got invited there. And we keep growing. I think we just got another one for another airline.
United.
Oh, United. Yep. United, we have a specific summary page because they launched back when our tag came out in October. And in the span of like 4 weeks, they changed all of their accounting methodology.
Man,
like 4 times.
Don't get me started. Listen, I know that everybody from United that works there listens to this podcast, and you guys are killing us. Like, man, it is so hard to keep up with this app website. Oh, it's so hard.
Keeping us busy.
But it's been stable now for a few months. So I think they finally figured out exactly how they want time reported. And
man, I hope they're loving it. I hope they're sitting there in Denver like, man, I'm super glad we made these changes. So
They're probably like, watch these guys dance. Let's see if we can watch everybody tap dance.
How fast can MilKEEP update their stuff?
Well, it happened during the RTAG, like right before the RTAG convention, and like my life exploded, not because I was applying, but like everybody that wanted to go to United was like in this, like on this treadmill, and somebody just put like max blast on the treadmill, and they're just sprinting as hard as they can to get it done. Oh, Lord have mercy. All right, we digress a little bit. Okay, so you guys are really involved in going to the conventions and things like that. Like, what have you seen kind of the evolution of going to these conventions and like what people are talking about and what's relevant in the timekeeping world?
Well, first of all, they've exploded. Just the number of people. I mean, I think we went to the first RTAG convention, 5 years ago?
We did. And it was like at the Days Inn outside of Fort Rucker. Like,
and there were a good amount of people, but now
I think it was like 200 or so. And we were like, man, this is pretty popular.
Bonkers.
And last October was over 5,000. And they're giving out CJ.
And the formats have changed a lot. Now they're bringing interviewers there. Mm-hmm. They're having on-site interviews. Yes. So I would say that's changed a lot as well.
It's fantastic. They're a great organization, very charitable, nonprofit, just trying to help out.
But a lot of the conventions are doing that. I mean, TPN's doing similar. Mm-hmm. They started their convention, 5 or 6 years ago, too. Yep. We went to their first convention. They've been wonderful as well. So the formats changed, I would say, a lot. And then just the number of attendees and the people who are planning way further out, people who aren't able to get out for another 5 or 6 years are getting their ducks in a row well ahead of time, I would say.
Even 10 years.
Yeah.
When we first started, our kind of main customers were people retiring at 20 years and people at the end of their 10-year commitment. And now it is the entire swath of retirees, but people who are still just starting out in their career, but they want to start getting their foot in, figuring out, because everybody has said the worst part about the airline application process is ignoring my logbook for 20 years and then trying to do it. So I think that word has finally gotten out. Like, it's much easier to do it day by day and have a good running tally of what's going on. And then you can also, like in our system, there's a remarks section, right? You can put in those times you need to recall. When did I have an emergency? Is this a good tell me about a time story? Is this a good customer service story? And then you can go back and just filter it out and say, okay, these are all good times. These are all times that I flew that I can have a good story to tell for the interview process.
Yeah. Combat time. Do you guys cover combat time at all?
We do. Yeah. We cover combat, and then Air Force has something called combat support time also. So we can log all of your combat time. And for Air Force specifically, we have a membership option where you can tag any flight for a medal, an air medal, and the system automatically generates your paperwork for you.
Oh my gosh.
It automatically creates the PDF, it sends it to you, and then it takes those remarks like, hey, for these 20 missions that you're applying to this air medal, here are all the things that you did. Because everyone has to write like a citation to go along with it. So it kind of gives you a summary of what you can put in that citation for you.
There is a Navy helicopter guy right now who's crying, who just started to cry because we don't get air medals, like no matter what. Like, you could have killed Osama bin Laden and they've been like, well, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. You'll get your paycheck on the 15th.
Don't look for BAH. It's not coming. Oh, man, that's awesome. All right. So how can the pilot that's listening, first off, I think I need to say this. Like, if you're 3 to 5 years out, this is when you need to be doing this. If you're 6 months out, you should have done it yesterday, and it's time to get your butt in gear. Like, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's quick, but it's not instantaneous. And you need to go through and scrub it, because one of the things, Bill is famous for saying this. Bill Sims, the co-founder of Spitfire, he is famous for saying that your logbook is your thesis. And you need to be able to defend your thesis. And you need to know every hour that's in there. And if there's a mistake, you need to know that mistake. And if there's a page that's not signed, you're probably not getting the job. So you need to go through that and be able to be articulate about it. And to do that, it takes time. If you're 3 weeks away from an interview and you haven't stopped to look at your logbook, this is like, you're in a world of hurt and in crunch time. So like, this is important. And this is why I brought you guys on, is because I think that what you have is an awesome tool. And I think that it is important that the pilot understands that they need to get their tails in gear, because they've got to know. And if they don't, they're going to miss out. I've had so many people sent home because of logbook problems. So many.
Yeah. The IT infrastructure for any of the services is obviously not stellar, especially when it comes to logbooks and record keeping. I can't count how many times we've had someone write in, I just came back from a deployment, they lost all my records, or they tried to transition to an all electronic system back in 2019, I believe. Mm-hmm. But just before that, Tyndall Air Force Base and Offutt Air Force Base completely flooded, and it destroyed the entire records office. And prior to that, everything was paper. So 2 entire bases worth of pilots were writing to us saying, how do you fix this? How can you help? I was like, man, we'd love to help you, but if you don't have your paper records, it's trouble. So I think that word has kind of gotten out as well. And people are saying, I want to get my stuff in another system that is up to date and is not going anywhere. It lives in the cloud and it's safe and secure.
Yeah. I had a guy who came through and his house burnt down and his logbook was in there. And he scraped up a bucket of ashes and put them in a Ziploc bag and was like, brought it to his interview. And he got the job, like really crazy. So like,
that's brutal.
It is brutal, man.
That's another reason that it behooves you, if you can, to log these things as you go, because we see a lot of errors in logbooks, just a lot of mistakes. Because these are people typing this information in, and if they miskey something or they double enter things, it's hard to go back 10 years after the fact and change that in that record, and then your totals are off.
Yeah. In the Air Force, it's actually impossible.
We see a lot of potential, a lot of discrepancies.
As we were building the system, we learned the Air Force's system, it's called ARMS, Aviation Resource Management System. The system was built in the 70s, I believe, but it cannot contain or retain, I should say, individual sortie data if it's more than 18 months old. It purges everything. So what they do is they take a rollover summary total and start over every 18 months. So we've had people come back, we'll do all their records and we'll say, hey, here are possible duplicates from whatever, 5-10 years ago. And they'll say, great, I'm going to go to the office and get these fixed. And I have to tell them, like, you can't get this fixed. Like, they deleted the entry that existed to be fixed. So the best you can do is kind of explain it in your interview and stuff, that the Air Force Records Office kind of kept a duplicate entry, deleted everything, and then it's in my rollover summary total forever.
Yeah, be able to defend your thesis. If you are not articulate about it and nice and convincing, if you're the guy that they bring around the corner and they hand a calculator to, you've already lost the interview. Because if you're going to have to start adding your stuff up on the spot, it's over. Like, you might as well get your bag and go get a bus ticket. Like, it is not going to go good.
Yeah.
That is true.
Same thing for the civilian side. I mean, I would say sometimes people will send us the template and they've got errors in there. Luckily, the system will highlight those errors for them so that they can go change them or make any updates that they need. At least they know it's there and they can fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to manage that ahead of time. If you're 20 years old and you're doing it at your local college or whatever, like, get in there, get on MilKEEP, get doing the thing. Like, it's super important.
Mm-hmm. We're also, the civilian side, able to point out, we call dual logging. So people will go and they will log student time and PIC time concurrently. And we'll say, hey, why are you doing this? They'll say, well, I was the sole manipulator of the controls. And we say, okay, well, that may be correct according to a CFR definition, but airlines, they only want to see PIC time where you were the person that signed for the jet. You were the one solely responsible for safe operation of the flight. Like, sole manipulator of the controls doesn't count. So, and they say, oh, okay, good, thanks. So we say, hey, if you were a student under instruction, you should probably call it dual time. If you were the person that signed for the jet, obviously you're PIC. And then in another instance, people will dual log instructor time and PIC concurrently. And we have to tell them, hey, depending on where you're applying, they want you to separate this instructor time out completely. Because on the back end of their system, they're reporting to these carriers a total PIC time, which is PIC plus your instructor. And if you're including it and you're dual logging it, then you're overstating your hours and they're not going to match when the airline comes back and says, okay, this was the total we got. Why is yours so much higher? So we're able to catch those things when they upload their civilian stuff.
Here's what I like is that, you know, there's a ton of logbook companies out there. Anybody can do a logbook, but like, what you are providing is that personal touch, that bit, like, because any computer system will gonk you laid out and add up your numbers and give you a total. But the fact that you need to know that your instructor time or your PIC time, like those are two different buckets, and like to understand that and the complexities, and maybe it depends on the airline and what airline are we talking about. Like, nobody else does that. And that's the special sauce. And that's the difference maker, is that you can have certainty with it. When you walk forward, you know what you have and you know who you're talking to. As long as you remember what airline you're going to talk to, like, you'll know. So that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gosh, guys. So I'm sold. Like, how do we find you guys?
You can reach us on Facebook, or email is usually the best way to reach us. www.milkeep.com is our website. team@milkeep.com is our email address. We're reachable 24 hours a day,
And we're
7
really,
days a week.
I like to pride ourselves on being very responsive. We don't sleep.
That's true. I'll text Chris at like 4 a.m. He'd be like, hey, what's up? What do you need?
Because we have people from all over the world.
All over the world.
You know, we have people flying in Japan, in Afghanistan, used to be Afghanistan, all different time zones. And so we're getting uploads around the clock. We're getting questions around the clock. So,
But we're grateful to do it.
Absolutely.
We're happy and we're grateful to do it.
Heck yeah.
and happy to go back and forth. Like we always say, if someone says, I don't understand this, like we want you to be comfortable with your logbook. If you do it correctly, that should be 2 minutes out of your entire interview, right? It should be clean, organized. It looks exactly the way it should. You're showing me that you were in the military, but you were able to convert it, and you can show me all your civilian time as well. Let's move on. And I want to make sure that you're a good person that I want to talk to in a plane for 4 hours, right?
Yep. I can tell you from experience, having a conversation about your logbook is nothing you ever want to do, because that's the thing you don't prep for. Man, it's so terrifying. Oh my, I'm getting anxiety just thinking about it. I'm going to put all your contact information in the show notes. And guys, go over there, milkeep.com, MILKEEP. And that's it. It's a great tool, and I'm super stoked. I'm glad I've got you, Kim and Chris Uhland. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Nick.
So
It was great
much.
seeing you.
It was great to meet you.
Hey, before you jump out of here and go on to the next podcast, can I ask a big favor? Would you mind going over to your app that you're listening to this podcast on and give me a review? Give me a 5-star review if you love it. Give me a 1-star review if it totally sucks. Put a comment in there, something that is helpful. It helps me. It helps get the word out there. It helps people find the podcast, and that's super cool. If you don't do that, maybe you could just share the podcast with a friend. Tell a buddy who's trying to figure it out, trying to sort out this pilot dream of theirs and get a little bit further. That is super awesome as well. Last, if you don't do either of those two things, how about this? Find a way today to make yourself 1% better. Do that thing that you've been putting off. Put your foot forward, make movement, get yourself going, get that inertia that you need to succeed in this industry. So that's your choice. Leave a review, tell a friend, or make yourself better. Either way, it's all a good choice. And I'm super stoked you're listening, and I will see you on the next episode. The statements made on this show are my own opinions and do not reflect, nor are they under any direction from my employer.